friends, and welcome back to the Brilliancy Point. Today, we are going to discuss one of the most interesting and insightful poems of ISC Class 12th Reverie. This poem is none other than Dover Beach by Mathew Arnold. First of all, let me tell you what all we will discuss in this video. Initially, I'll tell you a brief introduction about the poem, which will help you to understand the background of this poem. Then I'll give you a line-by-line explanation of the entire poem. And then towards the end, I'll discuss some of the most central themes of this poem, which will not only help you to understand the poem to its depth, but it will also help you to write answers in exam. So with this, let us start the poem Dover Beach. So this poem is being penned by Mathew Arnold, who is known to be the third great Victorian poet, after Alfred Lord Tennyson and Robert Browning. And the best works of Mathew are usually based on nature, modern society, and moral instruction. And we can see all these three themes being reflected in this poem as well. Now, when we talk about the background of this poem is basically a dramatic monologue. A monologue because there is only one speaker in the poem, or there is only one character who is expressing his views in this poem. Now, if you have read the poem, then you will know that there are two references being made in the poem. One is a direct reference made to the poet's wife or the poet's partner, and the second reference is to a very famous Greek playwright known as Sophocles. But these two references are just references, and those two characters being mentioned, they are not featured in the poem. Featured means we don't know their views, and they are not speaking or conveying anything directly to the readers, that is to us. And that is why we say that this poem is a dramatic monologue, because there is no character featured in the poem other than the poet himself. And the next important thing about the poem is that this poem is written in the form of an elegy. E-L-E-G-Y. Elegy means it is a mourning or a lament. Now, what is the poet lamenting over? That we will discuss and discover later on in the poem. And the next important thing is that this poem starts with a very beautiful description of the nature. But towards the end, it exposes the modern reality or the reality of the modern world. So we can say that this poem has a transition or a shift in mood. It begins with a description of a nature, and later on it turns into a reflection, reflecting the reality of the modern world. Let us begin with the poem. The first line says, "The sea is calm tonight. The tide is full. The moon lies fair upon the straits." So the first line tells us about the silence and the motionlessness of the environment around the poet. The poet is facing the Dover beach, and he is saying that the sea is calm tonight, which means that there is a lot of silence in the environment, and there is a kind of peace also, but in a slightly negative way. Because when we talk about silence and motionlessness, then it gives us an impression that there is a feeling of sadness, a feeling of desolation and dejection in the poet. And later on, this point will become more clear. Then the second line is, "The tide is full, the moon lies fair upon the straits." So the tide is full means the waves are coming and going, and there are high tides. And the moon lies fair, which means that in the darkness and in the silence of the environment, the moon is shining bright, as it always does. Then upon the straits. So straits means meeting point of two water bodies. So let me tell you the geographical location of Dover Beach so that you will understand it better. So Dover is an English ferry port in Kent, which faces France. And it is the narrowest part in English Channel, which means that Dover Beach lies in such a way that it is facing France, it is facing the French coast, and it lies along the English coast or the English Channel. So upon the straits means the meeting point of the French coast and the English coast. So the poet can see in front of his eyes, a little far away, the meeting point of the French coast and the English coast. So the poet is saying that on the French coast, the light gleams and is gone. Means the poet is facing the French coast, and upon that French coast, the light is gleaming and is gone. Which means that the light was once shining bright, but gradually it is depleting or it is vanishing. It is becoming blur. Now, why is it becoming blur? It is becoming blur because of the high tides. Because as we said, the tide is full. So because of the high tides, the vision of the French coast is becoming blur. Whereas the cliffs of England stand glimmering and vast. Because the Dover beach, it lies along the English coast. So the coast on which the poet is actually standing, in that coast, all the buildings and the cliffs and everything is standing very bright, glimmering and vast. Whereas the French coast, which the poet is facing, it is becoming blur and blur because of the high tides. Out in the tranquil bay. Out in the tranquil bay. So bay means a piece of land covered by water bodies. So as we all know that the beach, it is covered by sea. So we say it bay. And then tranquil. Tranquil means again silent and motionless. So again it highlights the fact that there is a lot of silence in a negative way on the beach on which the poet is standing. Then he says, "Come to the window, sweet is the night air." Now, if you read this line carefully, come to the window, sweet is the night air. So, poet is asking someone to come to the window. Now, who is this someone? And obviously, it is not the readers, because we are not into the picture, or we are not directly into the scene when the poet is describing this nature. We are not into the picture, so this is not a reference to the readers. It is a reference to someone who is there along with the poet in the room itself. Since the poet is saying come to the window, it means that poet is in a room, and from the window of that room he is facing the Dover beach, and the poet is known to be on his honeymoon while he has written this poem. So it is most probably poet's wife. So the poet is asking his wife to come to the window. Sweet is the night air. Only from the long line of spray where the sea meets the moon-blanked land. Listen, you hear the grating roar of pebbles which the waves draw back and fling. So the poet first says that the night air is very sweet, but only from the long line of spray where the sea meets the moon-blanked land. Now, moon-blanked land means the land on which the moon is shining, and the moon is glimmering and showering its light. So the land which is being lit by the moon. So on that land, what is happening? There is a long line of spray. Long line of spray because when the sea waves, they hit the land. When the sea waves, they hit the land. So the water suddenly spurts a little, and it causes a line of spray, because along with the waves some pebbles also come, and due to those pebbles hitting the ground, hitting the land, there can be seen a long line of spray. So this is the line of spray the poet is referring to, when the pebbles which are being drawn by the sea waves, when they hit the land, they form a line of spray. Listen, you hear the grating roar of pebbles which the waves draw back and fling at their return up the high strand. Now again, when the poet is saying listen, he is again referring to his wife, and he is asking her to listen to the grating roar. Now grating means irritating or disturbing. Now he is saying that till now he was describing the nature as silent and motionless, and now he is saying that in this silent environment, now there is a sound which is disturbing this silence in the environment. The environment which was so silent and peaceful, now some sound is disturbing this silence in the environment, and this sound is being created by pebbles because as I said just now that when the waves they come and go, when there is ebb and flow of waves, so they bring pebbles along with them and then they return. Means along with the ebb and flow of waves, there is ebb and flow of pebbles. And these pebbles, when they hit the land, they make a very disturbing sound because that sound is very harsh and it is not pleasing to our ears. Begin and cease and then again begin. This phrase is referring to the cycle of waves, or this is referring to the continuous coming and going of waves. As we know that sea waves, they come and then they flow back and then they again come. So this process is being described as begin and cease and then again begin. With tremulous cadence slow and bring the eternal note of sadness in. Now this word tremulous means shivering or shaking, and cadence refers to a musical phrase. It basically refers to the ups and downs in a musical phrase, means the rise and fall in the voice of the singer, rise and fall of the rhythm, the pitch and all. So the poet is actually comparing the rise and fall of sea waves, the rise and fall of tides to the rise and fall of voice when a music and when especially a sad music or a sad song is being sung. So therefore, the poet is saying that when he looks at these sea waves in at a very on a very silent night, then he feels that these sea waves, along with them, they are bringing a note of sadness. So here we end the first stanza. Now let's look at the second stanza. Sophocles long ago heard it on the Aegean, and it brought into his mind the turbid ebb and flow of human misery. So first of all, who is this Sophocles? Sophocles is a Greek playwright who is very famous and who is known for tragedies, who is a famous tragedian, a tragedy writer, and he is very well known for understanding human sorrow and human misery, because most of his tragedies are based on human misery and human sorrow. So why is the poet making an allusion or a reference to Sophocles? Because the poet is saying that the way Sophocles has mentioned or written in his works, in his plays about human misery. So the poet, while he is standing on the Dover beach, he is feeling the same thing. Means whatever Sophocles has written in his tragedies, poet is able to feel it while standing on the Dover beach. And therefore he is saying that maybe Sophocles would also have stood on a sea beach, and this sea being referred to here is Aegean, which is in the north, which is in the Greece. So he is saying that he also must have stood on the Aegean Sea in order to understand human misery and in order to understand the ebb and flow of human misery with the help of ebb and flow of sea waves. We find also in the sound a thought, hearing it by the distant northern sea. And the poet is saying that maybe Sophocles would also have understood the ebb and flow, means the coming and going and the continuous process of human misery. He would have understood it while standing on the Aegean Sea. And today I am getting the same thoughts while standing on this Dover beach and while hearing to the sound of the pebbles. So this is what the poet has tried to convey. Now comes the most important stanza of the poem, which is the third stanza, because this stanza talks about the central theme of the poem, which is the loss of religious faith. So the poet says, the sea of faith was once too at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. Which means the poet is making a direct comparison between the sea waves and faith. As the poet is standing on a seashore and he is looking at the rise and fall of the sea waves, so he is comparing that rise and fall of sea tides with faith. He is saying that once the sea of faith, the tide of faith was at the full, means once the entire world the people on this planet, they used to believe in religion. They used to have faith in religion. And he is comparing this faith with sea in order to describe the enormity or the hugeness of that faith. Means how people were bound by religion, how blindly they used to follow religion. This is what the poet is trying to convey by making a comparison between the sea waves and the faith. He is saying that once people used to believe in religion, means the tide was at its full, and round the earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle fold. Now the word girdle refers to a belt which is worn by women around their waist. So the poet is using the word girdle as an imagery to describe that how everyone on this earth was tied in the belt of religion. The way a belt covers one's body, in the same way there was faith in religion all over this planet. But now I only hear its melancholy long withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath of the night wind down the vast edges drear and naked shingles of the world. But this religious faith is a matter of past. It is the story of past now. This is the past. The present is something different. What is the present? In the present, the poet only hears a melancholy, long withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath, which means that now this tide of faith, which was at its full, now this tide is drawing back. Means now this tide is retreating, it is drawing back. And while it is drawing back, it is making a grating roar. As we studied, as we read in the first stanza, it is making a grating roar. Means it is showing something which is disturbing and which is sad, which is negative, which is not good. And while this wave is retreating, it is drawing back, it is exposing the naked shingles of the world. Now, this word naked shingles, it refers to the hideous reality of the modern world. In order to understand this, just imagine while on a seashore, while the waves they are drawing back. So when they are drawing back, we can see the underneath reality. We can see the dead body, the decayed material which is lying underneath the ocean, right? When the tide is full, when the sea waves are coming, then they cover that reality. But when the waves they draw back, they go back, then they expose the underlying reality, right? The dead bodies, the decayed material, the dead animals which are lying in the ocean. And this reality is hideous. It is not good to see those things, right? It is hideous, it is brutal, it is harsh. So the poet is saying, in the similar way, the sea of faith, means the tide of faith, the tide of religious faith, when it was at its full, then this world, it looked very beautiful. There was harmony among people, there was fellowship among people. But as this religious faith is decreasing because of scientific advancement, okay, so the poet in this poem is against the scientific development. He is saying that due to scientific advancement, there has been a loss of religious faith. And due to this religious faith, people have become more brutal, more hideous, and the hideous reality is being exposed. So the poet is saying that when this world was covered in religious faith, when people used to have religious faith, this world looked very beautiful. And as this religious faith is deteriorating, as it is decreasing because of scientific advancement, the hideous reality is being exposed. The world is becoming more and more dark, more and more harsh, and there is a lot of hideous reality around, brutal reality around, and there is no beauty in the environment. Now, this hideous reality, which the poet is referring to, it basically refers to wars. Nowadays, the wars that are happening, like today also we are on the verge of having third world war between Russia and Ukraine. So the wars that are happening, and not just the actual wars, but the cold wars and the fights and the feeling of rivalry between each other and the loss of fellowship. So this is the hideous reality of modern world which the poet is referring to. So the two most important points to note in this stanza are: first is the poetic device used. As there is a direct comparison of faith with sea waves or the sea. Therefore, there is use of metaphor. We can say that sea is the metaphor being used to describe faith, because there is no use of words like or as, and therefore it cannot be simile, and there is a direct comparison because we are calling the faith as the sea of faith, so therefore it is metaphor. And the second most important point is the cause for loss of religious faith. In simple words, we can say that the loss of religious faith is due to scientific advancement. But if we go back to the time period when this poem was written, it was written in Victorian era. And in the year in which it was written, that is 1867, at that time there was industrialization going on, and there was a lot of scientific theories being published and being proposed, such as you must have heard about Charles Darwin's The Origin of Species. So, the origin of species talks about the origin or the evolution of human beings from apes. So, it proposes that we are not the children of God, but we have landed on this earth and we have emerged as a process of scientific evolution, as a part of evolution from apes. So, due to such theories, it was more and more believed at that particular point of time that we are not the children of God, because earlier in Bible and in all the religious books we used to study that we are the children of God, and we used to have such enormous belief in religion, in God, and we used to guide ourselves in all the situations with the help of religious leaders and with the help of religious theories. But at the time when this poem was written, there were a lot of scientific theories coming into picture, and people had begun questioning the religious beliefs, the religious ideas on the ground of rationality and scientific terms. They started measuring religious outcomes in scientific terms. They began to see everything in scientific frame of mind. So that is why a poet is claiming that there has been a loss of faith in religion, and due to this loss of faith in religion, he says that this beautiful looking world is turning ugly and uglier day by day. Then, in the fourth stanza, the poet says, "Ah, love, let us be true to one another. For the world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath really no joy, no love, no light, nor certitude, nor peace, nor help for pain. And we are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night." So, in the fourth stanza, the poet is finally trying to emphasize the importance of love, affection, and companionship among people. He's trying to state the fact that this hideous reality, these wars, and this brutalness, this selfishness, it can only be overcome with the help of love and companionship. So here again, poet is making a reference to his partner, and he is asking his partner that our love, let us be true to one another. Let us be true to at least each other so that we can face this reality with ease. Because he says that this world, which seemed so beautiful with so many developments, so many advancements, uh, so many high storied buildings, pillars, and so artificial beauty, it is actually very harsh, and it is like a darkling plain. A darkling plain means a plain where people are fighting in dark, where there is no light, there is no certainty, no certitude, and people are just fighting for the causes they don't believe in, for the reasons which they don't know, right? We ourselves don't know what are we fighting for, but we do fight. If we talk about soldiers, they don't know that why are they fighting with the other armies, but they are just doing it as their duty. So without knowing the reason, without knowing the actual cause, we are just fighting blindly, recklessly, endlessly, undesirably, and unconsciously, and we are chopping off the same heads which we once used to trust. As today we can see that people in a single family are fighting with each other. Brothers are fighting among themselves, sisters are fighting among themselves, and the relatives, the friends, all are fighting with one another for no specific or for no comprehensible reason. So therefore the poet says that today we all are in a confused state, in an alarmed state, and we are struggling. That is, we are fighting for no reason, for some undesirable and uncomprehendable reasons. For example, we can see that today brothers are fighting with brothers. We are fighting with our friends, relatives, our closed ones, and we are fighting every other person around us. That is why the poet is referring to it as ignorant armies clash by night, which means that we are fighting in a dark room, in dark. We don't know who we are fighting and why we are fighting. It's like we all are being given swords in a dark room and we don't know whose heads we are chopping. So poet is kind of throwing light on the harshness, on the brutality, on the selfishness of the modern world. With this, we come to the end of the poem. Now let us discuss about the themes and other important points of the poem. First of all, there are two important themes in the poem. The first is loss of religious faith and second is love and affection. So this poem began as a beautiful description of nature in the first paragraph. Then, in the second paragraph, poet gives an allusion or a reference to the Greek playwright Sophocles. And in the third paragraph, the poet compares sea waves with faith. He uses the imagery of sea in order to delineate or in order to highlight the loss of religious faith and the terrible impact that this loss has created, because it has made the once beautiful looking earth look ugly, and it has exposed the hideous reality of the modern world. Then, in the fourth stanza, the poet suggests the best possible way to face this terrible situation and to face this harsh reality with ease. He says that the only way and the best possible way to face this situation is love and companionship. Then, let us talk about the mood of the poem. As I said in the beginning, this poem is an elegy. So, the mood of the poet in this poem is sadness and pensiveness. However, there is a little transition of mood because this poem begins with a sad mood, but towards the end, we can see a ray of hope because love is a kind of hope to survive in this modern world. So there is also an intertextuality between the Darkling Thrush and Dover Beach. So you can mention that this mood of the poem is quite similar to that of the Darkling Thrush because it begins on a pessimistic and a sad note, whereas it ends on quite an optimistic and hopeful note. With this, I hope that you have understood this poem very well. And if you have really liked this video, please like it and subscribe my channel. Thank you.